coming in, our first case that we received, the MUFON case received, should we go into that, you think, or, yeah, go right ahead, okay. Director's telling me.
No.
Okay.
Go. I'm not the Go.
The first one that came in on April the 18th. It was for a sighting on April 16th. This year, we're talking about this year, but there was 3 prior sightings that get sucked into this in 2011, which was the 21st. They all came in, 2 of them came in on October the 13th, 2011. One was for August 22nd with a photograph, which was a kite. The next one was the Miller Park sighting, which Ellison actually went to in an area very close to the Circle campus. There were multiple problems with that. The moon was, they said the moon was out, moon wasn't out. It would have been down by that time. It was raining out, and they're talking about this 7-foot creature flying along that was perched on top of a rim of a basket. Of course, there's no
basketball hoop there.
Nothing. And there's no 5-story buildings
No.
in that area, too. So you've been through the area.
Yeah, so the landmarks don't match up. So
No.
why would you put the report up there? This is my biggest problem with what's been going on with these reports is if there are obvious inconsistencies and the reports don't match basic facts of the location. Or, as in the case with one of the accounts, it's purportedly from a police officer, but what evidence do you have, especially when the witness says that they filed a police report, but there is no such police report? If these things do not match up, why are these cases still put in a book, still up on the website with no qualifications? I mean, nothing like notes saying, saying that, well, we doubt this case because of such and such, or you should know. They put it up there as if it's gospel, and that's the problem. I mean, none of this is gospel. When you investigate, you investigate it until it either falls down or it stands up, and there's nothing else that it could be. That's not what has happened here. It's just kind of wishful thinking. Let's pull together all these cases, even if they don't seem to match, that it's not a winged creature, it's more of a mechanical thing, or it's like just 2 red lights, and they all get, and one was even an insectoid creature that was reported, and they all get lumped together as the Chicago Mothman. Obviously, they don't fit.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't fit the Mothman of Point Pleasant type scenario either. So even where there's people who actually seen something and came forward, such as Jack spoke to 2 people, you can give us a scoop on that.
I spoke to the witness that saw this being jump off the Wills Tower. So I found this witness, and he said that he was smoking outside. It was in daylight, and he looked up and he said that he saw what he thought was somebody committing suicide jump off the building, but what happened was that it spread its wings, and it morphed from between a bird-like creature to an insect-like creature. And he saw it fly just for a couple of seconds before it flew out of sight. I did exchange numbers with this witness, and I have tried to follow up on his sighting. I wanted to do a formal interview with him, but unfortunately he's not responded to my texts or my calls, so I have not heard from him since then. The second witness I spoke to, he was a security guard at the bar called The Owl in Logan Square, and so this witness, his name is John, and I was able to interview him recently, and I posted it on my social media, and he says that he was out for a cigarette break as well while at work June 30th on Friday at 10:30, and he said that it was like a pterodactyl-like creature flying over the building and going westbound, and he saw it flap its wings and kind of disappeared into the distance.
Was that day or night?
At night, so it was like 10:30 at night.
How big was this thing?
He said it was, the wingspan was about, what did he say, 10 feet, I believe. So,
How'd you find the witnesses? Because they're not named on the site.
right, so for John, it said that he was security guard
Oh, so you
at the
tracked him
L,
down, okay.
so that's how I found him. I actually went to the location, and I asked a couple of staff, you know, did you submit this report? And of course, they were all looking at me like I was crazy until I actually found John. And then for the second one, I just kind of put things together. If you know, I read the report carefully and was kind of able to find out around where he might have been, and I went to that location to see if I could find this individual, and that's how I found him.
So he actually admitted to making the report. The guy-
Right. So I asked around a few times, and I found the
How did he
individual.
strike you?
I'm sorry?
How did his credibility strike you?
They both seemed very sincere. They spoke very coherently, and it wasn't they didn't seem crazy or anything like that.
Because some people say that all the reports have been made up by somebody just writing them off the top of their head. So apparently these two reports have a source anyway.
Right. Like Sam said, there is something real taking place, and as well as possible hoaxing taking place.
But
Yeah.
something that should be, really stressed is that these things that these people have witnessed are not the typical Mothman
Right.
that is reported from Point Pleasant.
That's
These
why
are
we
very
don't-
different.
Yeah.
These are very different.
Yeah, and the other thing to point out here is, we're not saying that all the reports are fabricated. We're just saying that the bulk of them seem to be, or they seem to have so many inconsistencies that they would need to be thrown out. So what we might be looking at here is a few authentic reports, but how can you tell when the website, when all the reports that are, or most of the reports that are on there seem to be nonsense? So it's like, maybe there's a few authentic reports, and who's ever behind this, one possible motive is just, flood with nonsense.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you can't tell the difference.
A typical way to debunk something is to throw bad in with the good.
Yeah.
Of course, they throw you off track. They throw you off track.
And that's what it
something
seems
we,
is happening. It
that's
seems
why
like a
we
test.
do not do that. We aren't throwing. And this is where people are saying, "Oh, these guys are a bunch of." No, if it's bunk, we got it. We figured it out.
Yeah, you
and
gotta
that's
say.
it. Sorry, Charlie.
Well, what about the first lady that saw him in the park, and out of the park?
Oz Park. Yeah, Oz Park. Now this goes back to the unusual aspect. That's the same person that seems to be getting most of the reports. No one else investigated that except him. The other thing is that comes in. That was the first one, April 7th, in Oz Park. The last report that came in was in 2011. Was October the 14th. The very next day after those two reports, initial reports came in, Miller Park and the August 22nd, were reported on October 13th. On October 14th, 2011, in Washington Park, supposedly a gentleman, or we don't even know if it's a man or woman.
I thought it was a woman, she was walking her dog.
No,
what I
that's
heard.
Oz Park. That's Oz.
Okay,
So
that's
2011, this person from Tasmania, sees what seems to be a large sugar glider flying overhead, and Tasmania is from where? Oz, Australia, which is called Oz. Okay, and now all of a sudden, the very first report that comes in on April 7th gets reported on April the 10th. Is from a young woman walking her small dog down the yellow brick road in Oz Park.
And if you've not
Okay.
been to Oz Park is actually filled with statues of Wizard of Oz. Yeah, the Tin Man, and
Yes,
it's almost
Now-
prelude to flying monkeys. I mean,
sure. And then the very next report, the person's name is one of the characters, part of his name is one of the characters in The Wizard of Oz. And you were there at Pilsen, the Pilsen district, and so were you. And you spoke to people there, and they had no idea what you were talking about, correct? Or
Yeah.
similar to that.
Yeah, it seems like when you go to the locations, I mean, you can really get a better perspective of hey, is this plausible? I mean, does it make any sense? Is there any scuttlebutt on the street? You know, and among workers at various locations where, you know, something happened in a workplace. And, you know, when you find out there's nothing, nobody knows about it, and, you know, stuff doesn't match up, I mean, there's nothing like boots on the ground. And if you want to see, all these locations, even the ones that have inexplicably been taken off of Lon Strickler's Phantoms and Monsters Mothman Sightings map, you can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mothman, and hear about all of the reports and see the locations for yourself and make your own determination as to whether there's any veracity.
The other one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there one on Lake Michigan? People
Oh.
late night on a boat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that one we'll
that
talk
one had a
about
lot of-
right
Yeah.
now.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the next one after the Pilsen district was Humboldt Park, okay? Humboldt Park, just so you understand, the person who wrote the book, The Wizard of Oz, was written in Chicago, okay? In 1900 was when it was published. It was written there, and the gentleman lived at 1667 Humboldt Drive Boulevard in Humboldt Park. The Wizard of L. Frank Baum. Now, the reflection of the sunlight from the street was where he got the idea of the yellow brick road. Now, when was the Mothman case? The 50-year anniversary was 1967. So 9 and 6 could be inverted many times in sort of cryptic manners and various occult type things. And he was a 33rd degree Mason. Somebody punched in on sighting 33, the name Oz, responding to Ellison.
Oh, my video, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have Oz following us all over the
Yeah,
place.
strolling
All
us.
this unusual stuff. Now the lady on the lake.
What about the coin?
Oh, boy. I'll talk to that in a second. The lady on the lake was supposed, it was April the 15th. It was filed on the 24th, I think. And she was on the lake with her husband on April the 15th. The water temperature was 44 degrees, as I recall. There was 3, 5, and 7-foot waves. The wind was as much as 30-some mile an hour gusts. Now, that isn't exactly good weather to go boating in small boats. You would go into that water, you'd dive pretty darn quick. I had it figured out how fast you'd grow. But anyways, she's out there 2 miles out on the lake, and she sees these 2 bats flying around with the moonlight glistening in its eyes, these giant bat-type things.
And they're making a love connection.
Oh,
They
yeah,
don't
they're doing
notice
it.
her.
Yeah, it's like,
They
it's
notice
the
each other.
love boat.
These bats flying around, you know, silhouetted by the moon.
Yeah, silhouetted by, and the terminology in there is just incredible. And the funny thing is, the glistening of the moonlight, the moon wasn't up till 11:43. Okay, so I mean, you get the idea, get the picture? They're painting the perfect scenario, they're painting with words. Then the other thing is there's this green light that moves across the horizon. A green light on Lake Michigan moving across the horizon from north to south would be correct, because it's the starboard side of your navigational light on your bow. This is correct. This is what it would be. And so that's what you would see. And why wouldn't there be other lights? Because you dim them. Because if you're going into port, you want to know where you're heading. So you don't want to get night blind. Or, you know, you don't want the light to blind you, so you have your night sight. Then, this is the type of stuff you were dealing with. Again, we had an issue where we found out that of the first 3, 2 came from the same source, submitted from the same source, from the IP address. From the last 4 that came in, the 3 came from the same IP address. So the bottom line is, right there, we needn't look anymore and say, there is an issue, enough's enough. Correct? Now, when it comes to the coin, we met, okay, our buddy, what's his name? Billy. Billy had a sighting, okay?
Yeah.
Billy had a sighting, said it was March something. He's sitting there at a truck. He's a trucker. He's in a dock. He's waiting to get a load. He sees something from his left going across, going into the sky. Well, that would be going actually into the wind, so it's pretty interesting. And what he described and explained was what we called reverse scalloping along the edge, so the edge like a Batman mobile. And that's what he said. It was like the Batman mobile, and he can't explain why, and that's what it was. He says it was mechanical, correct?
Yeah.
You've heard him, all of us heard him. I've heard him a number of times, I've spoken to him probably, 50 times, who knows? But he says the same things. But what gets reported is a humanoid, that he saw a humanoid. And that wasn't the case. That wasn't what he said. All of us here, it's just not what he said. Something mechanical is what he felt it was. He didn't see anything more than that. He doesn't attest to anything more than that. The man was trying to be as honest as possible. I met him in person, and when I went there to meet him, another gentleman who was there meeting somebody else to sell a coin came up to me. It was very unusual. He says, "Are you the doctor?" Doctor? I don't know. What do you got, a sliver? You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, it's like, come on. He goes, "No, I'm waiting to sell a coin to a doctor. He's supposed to meet me here." And I go, "Really? I'm into coins. I like coins. It's pretty cool." I go, "What kind of coin is it?" And it was a large cent with a large Benjamin Franklin design cent, the Fuego I Fly cent from 1797 or something like that. And he took it out and he says, "You know what it says on the back? It says, 'Mind your own business.'" Or "Mind your business." And I'm like, and he stared at me when he said that. I'm like, damn, you talk about putting a shiver down your spine, right quick. And so then I met Billy, and he had his brother with him. And Billy and his brother are really kooks. I mean, they're really hoots, He's got, not kooks, hoots. They are really interesting people, and very well dressed, very well built. And the brother's sitting there, and he has these tattoos up and down his arms. And one of the tattoos is, of course, the all-seeing eye in the pyramid. And I hear this right after my own business, looking at this coin, having known it has all this tie to Benjamin Franklin, all sorts of unusual stuff. And I'm like, I got jitters, yes.
Well, I mean, you can say, when you're talking about the second witness, to work at the Owl Club.
Oh.
Look at the logo from the Owl Club. It's
All
that
seeing
very
eye.
symbol
Oh my
that appears
God,
with the
that's
eye seen
true.
down there, and moving street plans. It's located in a triangular street.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
All of this combines
Crazy.
together. Go ahead.
So, speaking of coincidences and stuff, we mentioned earlier briefly about Allison's video. Her 33rd video, somebody commented by the name of Oz, and they mentioned cryptically how they've been in contact with these beings or something
yes,
of that nature. So this person Oz, I became really interested in that comment. So I followed the link to their social media. And well, first of all, their YouTube profile picture is a jester taking off a mask, and that in itself. And
No, the second one. The first one was the same as what's his name's using now.
Oh, right. So their second profile picture, I should say.
Our favorite troll.
but,
You know who you are.
It being the 33rd video, 33 has significance in the occult and in Freemasonry. And so I follow this person on social media, and he talks about the world being an illusion, the world being ruled by an evil creator god, and how none of this is real. And so that in itself has been really interesting just to follow his stuff. And I tried contacting him, but he has not replied back. So.
Yeah, if I recall, the comments were something to the effect of, actually, he contacted me earlier in another video and said, well, why don't you go out at night? And I'm like, well, how about this one? I do go out at night. And then he's like, you have to be careful. And then and I know these creatures. You have to be careful. And I'm like, dude, if I just disappear, just make sure they put eaten by a Mothman on my tombstone. And then he wrote back, he's like, this is not a laughing matter. They will rip you apart. And I'm like, okay, dude, whatever. They will
I got
rip
two of my
you
fish
apart.
tank. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Whatever.
That's no problem for you.
No problem.
So, Sam, I have a question. Like, maybe paint the bigger picture for everybody.
The bigger
Yeah.
picture? Okay.
And I want to know, okay, so there's 60 reports, 60 official police reports,
No,
60
no.
reports
No
with
police
who?
reports. Yeah.
With who?
Yeah,
Who they
well,
filed?
well, and-
Like, I
Right.
feel like there's
That's the
stuff
big
like
issue.
people who haven't, like, I've heard about the Chicago Mothman sightings, but
Because they've been shared everywhere, if you go and you look at the reports, they all trace back to 2 individuals.
Except for the
lon-
MUFON.
There's been 7 to MUFON, right? 7?
Well, 7 in the original, be 8, and then one was, Billy was sent directly to me, so that'd be 9.
Okay,
Okay,
so
9.
there's been the MUFON reports, which the ones that have not been in contact with Sam have all come from 2 of the same IP addresses.
Sam,
Oh, yeah,
you
that's right.
received MUFON reports about this.
Yes.
But the
That's 9.
minority,
Okay.
the rest
Yeah.
of them are
No.
going to 2 people. Lon,
Yes.
Lon Strickland of
Okay.
Phantoms
Yeah,
and
Lon
Monsters
Strickland.
blog, and Manuel Navarrete of
And
UFO
Tobias.
Clearinghouse.
Tobias had 3.
Okay. Tobias had one actual sighting, and then he talked to a witch that apparently manifested the Mothman creature. It's like, no, I don't know. I don't
Yeah, it
know.
doesn't seem to have a lot of weight to it. So, the bulk of the reports come from 2 people. And they will not share their information. And the idea about the police report is I may have said this before, but there's one case where, according to the witness said they were a police officer. They also said, I filed a police report. All right, so I'm like, yes, there's a police report. That's freedom of information. I can get that. And unfortunately, I was on the Chicago Phantom Task Force at that time, and I reached out to the rest of them, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm excited about this police report. Let's get it. And I'm like, well, who sought it? And what was the form of the request, and what was the response? Because with Freedom of Information Act request, you sometimes have to pose them in a certain way. And if you don't get it. So that's why I was like, I wanted more information. And if they didn't get anything back yet, I wanted to change the approach. And so nobody on the task force could provide me any information as far as actually going out and seeking that report. So why wouldn't they want to seek that report? That's something concrete. So then I went through my own sources and found out there is no such report. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we had all these guys on the See You on the Other Side, the podcast on othersidepodcast.com, and we had Tobias Whalen from Singular Fortean blog on, and he's still on the task force and a friend. And so I asked him, like, what is the deal with this police report? And he said, well, my understanding, Allison, is that pretty much everybody on the task force knows there's no police report. So here's my point. If a witness says, hey, I'm a police officer, I filed a report, and then you find out it's false, why is that report still in there and treated with, the same as all the other ones, right? Why isn't that one thrown out? And see, that is the problem. When there's inconsistencies, when people claim to be police officers and you cannot verify it.
Maybe that they're getting hits.
Yeah, well, of course.
I mean, it's
Well, right, and you have to look at it too that Lon Strickler released a book on these Mothman sightings, and of course it came out on December 15th, 2017, the 50th anniversary of the Silver Bridge collapse, which is connected, of course, to what's thought as initial Mothman sightings. So. Isn't that convenient
Well, I'd
then,
also like to
that we have
mention-
so many sightings, but just in time so you can get a book out for the anniversary?
And I'd also like to mention how convenient it is that the Mothman hasn't made any appearances since the book has been released. And when I interviewed Lon Strickler and asked him, do you think this will continue? He said that Mothman takes the winters off.
I mean, frankly, I'm glad, because the last video we did was a little bit cold. But how would he know?
And I argued that fact, and I said, what would make you think that? And he said that there's not as many people outside, so they're not going to be reporting it. And I have lived in Chicago. I know that people are still going to work out all over the place. And if there is this 10-foot, wingspan flying across the sky, someone will see it.
two of them, I've seen the MUFON reports. two of them. One of them has a return phone number 123456789. Another has do not contact me. I've found that, in my estimation as an English professor, is that also that several of them are very literarily written. It's almost like somebody writing short fiction.
Yeah.
Because usually a witness will give a 400 or 500 word statement, maybe, but not 3,000.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
And that was
Not that long, but-
something I would like to say to that too. Is I asked what was Lon's opinion on that? Why are all of these reports have so much narrative? There's so much detail that is not normal. The average person doesn't write.
Really well written.
Doesn't write like that. And he
Like a
said,
creative
well, I
writer.
rewrite all of the reports for the ease of the reader. And I argue that. I think that I understand what he's saying, that the average person wants to read this fictional story, but you should also include the raw email, the raw conversation that you had over the phone, because you're misconstruing the
Absolutely.
evidence.
We gotta go. That's it.
We're leaving.
I was gonna say one final thing.
Yes.
I was gonna say one final thing. My picture of the Mothman.
There you go. There you go. And tell them what it is.
Okay.
Is that, wait.
No, I took this
I think I
in
know what it is.
Crystal Lake, Illinois. Just, I'm always looking up in the sky too, and I see this object just kind of coming off the, kind of directly at me, but it wasn't moving fast, and it was black, and it was just weird. It started changing shapes, and it was coming closer. So what do? I hit video, because that's what I do. And I'm taking video of this thing, and it's coming over me, and I still can't identify it. Finally, it's out of sight. I look at it. I never hit record. I hit picture. That's the only picture I got. Now, so what did I do? I mean, I looked at it and I thought, well, very odd looking or whatnot. So I gave it to Sam to analyze, and it turns out to be a clump of balloons.
It's 3.
Now, I have my own page too, and my own YouTube channel. But this did not end up on there.
Well, thank you, folks.
Thanks, Sam.
Dan. Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's get this
There
done.
were 60 reports.
Right.
How many reports down the line did it take before the word Mothman showed up?
Before
Was it
the.
the very first report?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the way all of these things are grouped. Even if they don't fit, even if it sounds more like a UFO, it's all lumped together under Mothman.
The other thing is, in all the reports, you think that